This audio clip begins right in the middle of a sentence because the recorder got turned on at that moment and the earlier conversation was not recorded. The prelude to this conversation, where it picks up, was an assertion that there would be a need to have a substantial amount of even age management, clear cutting and its alternatives on the forest in order to provide adequate diversity of stand conditions in the eventuality that a future researcher came to the forest and needed that uneven age stand for his or her research. We start in the middle of Kim Rodriguez's response to this assertion.
We gave last night, and the three plans we heard today, excluding even age management options, looking at the current landscape and looking at what's on the landscape. We might debate whether the current 26% or so that's in the management plan is too much or not enough, but there should be some place on the landscape that level of observation and work and management can be done. And so I don't see it excluding it. It may not be to the percentage that it is in some of the current plans, but it would still be a tool. It'd have to be again framed with the research. I think would have to be framed around what are we studying in that management that is going to inform the ultimate goal of restoring ecosystem function, moving towards, if there was agreement, that was the overarching direction. That sounds like there's some interest in that, even from the scientists that were here yesterday. And so I don't see it as excluding it, it just might not.
It seemed, what I heard was that we would have to have a specific proposal to implement an even age system.
So I reframed it around what we talked about as a science group last night. I thought every group said you might want to maintain these paired kind of opportunities so that proposals could come and take advantage of those. So I wouldn't exclude those landscape options.
Yeah, but I think you do if you don't create those now. You won't have them in 40 or 50 years when there might be an opportunity to do an experiment. You can't instantly create a 40-year-old even age stand.
Well, I guess my reaction to that would be you should probably justify why that would be important in the overall goal to get towards the goal we're talking about. And if you can justify it now, then that's probably, I'm not being confrontational, I'm just saying, I don't know the forestry well enough to say, that there are good things. But a question about just, yeah, I don't know what the answer to that would be, but if you could structure your proposal in such a way that you could validate that kind of management plan within the realm of going towards this ecologically cool old growth sterile stage, then that makes sense. But, I think it would need to be developed and proposed and thought out in the context of the goal.
It is a real chicken and egg issue, and we've wrestled with it for some time because. Kevin's point in terms of not being able to anticipate the specific questions, but still seeing real value in having a range of structural conditions out there is valid, and there are multiple examples of that great research having been done because the structure is there. At the same time, we've got this need to put forward a working hypothesis for the landscape.
With due respect to your view of feeling that there is a justification for doing things just for the value of research because you don't know, the future is uncertain, therefore you want to have everything. I would say there's the other side of that, which is the side that I kind of come from more, says that if you're going to propose something in the way of manipulating the forest for future research that is destructive of the goals of restoring the ecosystem, that you really need to be able to make the case that the benefits that are going to ultimately come out of those experiments are sufficiently worthwhile that it's worth doing this. And probably, it's a question of scale. If it's fairly small, people will say, okay, you're giving up 100 acres or a few hundred acres to do something, and yes, it may be destructive. We don't really know. But if you want to do it on 10,000 acres, then you're going to, from my point of view, you're going to have to make a really strong case. And I think that's appropriate. Pure scientists would maybe put just pure science above everything else. For me, it doesn't go that way.
I'm just always trying to bring this practical, but I don't think you can hold all your options open for the future constantly. You got to get going. I mean, how much difference out there can there be? So researchers are always going to find an opportunity among the stand states, but I think you got to kind of commit to what the plan is and go. Not try to keep all the options open for research in the future. There will be opportunities. People will figure them out, but you kind of have to go for something.
I would agree that it sounds like there's kind of an overall hypothesis for the forest regarding, quote, natural forestry. And it seems that a lot of the basic research on things like uneven age stand tables normally fall out of that. I think it also is important to see this in the context of the landscape. It's not like we're in a landscape where everybody is doing that kind of forest. If you want a 40-year-old clear cut in 40 years, I know where to find you one. Walla Redwoods, for instance, is doing alternate clear cuts up and down the watershed. So I think we have to look at this as a relatively unique piece of ground, and I agree with Kate. You can't keep it open for all possibilities. You have to, follow the direction that you're trying to take for the whole forest.
Just a silvicultural perspective that might help. If we were to go back, 70 or 80 years, and let's just assume Jackson Forest existed, there was a cycle in silviculture where everybody was doing uneven age silviculture. And at the time, a committee like this might have met and decided to do, basically, uneven age silviculture on the forest, which I think that in particularly the landscape plan sounds like, basically one type of structure over the forest. Then we went into the 50s and the post-World War II area in the 60s, and we went through an even-aged theme. And can you imagine us meeting in the 60s and deciding, well, we're going to implement an even-age system over the entire forest? And now the pendulum's swinging back. And so I'm not saying that we need to accommodate every potential research need on the forest. But I'm saying let's not put all our eggs in one basket. Let's recognize that the pendulum may swing back again, and we don't want Jackson to be the completely wrong types of structures for whatever the human needs are down the road.
Kate?
Yeah, so I don't want my comments to be construed that I'm supporting. I think what was called the landscape allocation plan is too rigid. And the model, starting a model of around it, we're heading everything to natural forestry, includes a lot of management that's going on in the state. But I at the same time, I agree with the flexibility part of the research plan, but it's too nebulous at this point. So who can talk about it? So I could offer ideas about how to have something that actually is hypothesis testing, flexible, but also is clear about how it's driving and testing various hypotheses. So each one of these things that we've heard about has a problem. But I think the forest does have to commit, but I think the landscape allocation one in particular seemed very rigid.
So can I just insert a quick point of clarification to people hold as a operating principle from that work last night that broad categories that can be described and articulated well can help us get going and maintain some opportunities are all consistent with an overall goal for the forest?
I think you almost have to do that to have the dialogue in the public. It's part of the process. So you have to be able to say, there's going to be some sets of experiments out here, and there's going to be some general patterns that you can expect to evolve from this forest. I think you have to do that in public to understand where anything is going and to put some overall boundaries so people understand what that is.